Yeah, so welcome everybody. We're really glad that you all were able to join us this morning. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as well, and use that throughout for any questions that you may have, and the panelists may be able to get to it. We may not be able to get to it. If we don't, we will just follow up with you all via email. Just as a general reminder, we are recording the forum today, and we will be able to share it afterwards, because I know there were a lot of people who wanted to be able to access it afterwards who maybe weren't able to join us today. So just be aware of that as well. And we ask that you stay muted throughout. Again, we're going to take the questions though in the chat if you have those. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ashley Bush to kind of set the stage for today.
Thank you, Courtney. Hello, we are excited to have you all join us today for the Connect Bluegrass Face It Forum. Connect is a mnemonic we have developed to assist parents and other caregivers in providing resilience building blocks for their children against adverse childhood experiences, also known in shorthand as ACEs. ACEs are potentially traumatic events that occur during childhood, which is less than 18 years of age, and these can be events such as experienced child maltreatment, being in a home where you're witnessing domestic violence or any other type of violence, having a loved one attempt or die by suicide. Additionally, there are other factors within a child's environment that can undermine their sense of safety, stability, and bonding, such as growing up in a household with substance misuse, untreated mental illness, instability due to parental separation or incarceration, and community experiences such as neighborhood violence and poverty. ACEs can be emotionally upsetting, painful, or stressful, with effects that persist throughout the lifespan. And these include poor health outcomes such as morbidity, risky behaviors, injury, and premature mortality. Furthermore, ACEs are common. Individuals who have at least one ACE are more likely to have health problems, than those who do not have an ACE at all. If this is the first time you've heard about ACEs, this most likely, it is more bad news amidst this public health emergency. And ACEs may be exacerbated in a child's life by school closures, social isolation, food, housing insecurity, and others, as well as disproportionately affecting populations that are already at risk for ACEs. The good news is that ACEs and their associated harms are preventable. Creating and sustaining safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments for all children and families can help prevent ACEs and help all children to reach their full potential. It takes all of us to serve and support parents, caregivers during these public health emergencies. Today's panelists are a great reminder of some community resources that are available to support parents and caregivers. As part of the CDC Kentucky Violence Injury Prevention Program, we will be developing a toolkit aimed at improving childhood resiliency during public health emergencies. And this will be housed on the FACEIT website, which is faceItabuse.org. A part of this toolkit is a one-pager on the Connect mnemonic, which will be released within the next few weeks, so stay tuned. And today, we will be focusing on the Connect mnemonic, specifically C, call for help, O for organized one-on-one connections, N for noticing triggers, and taking time to talk with our panelists as they talk about preventing trauma and promoting resiliency in children and families. I will hand it over to Tanya to introduce today's panelists.
Thanks, Ashley. So thank you all for joining us this morning, and thank you for those who are going to be listening to this recording later on. We're super hopeful that this will be helpful to parents and caregivers and to other professionals as you help families navigate these incredibly trying times in our state and across the country. So I want to take a little bit of time to introduce our amazing panelists. We're so grateful that they took time out of their really busy schedules to join us. So first we have Rainey Minikin. She's the District Coordinator of ESS Guidance and Mental Health Services with Fayette County Public Schools Student Support Services, and likely has the longest job title of anyone we know. We also have Crystal Hankinson, who's the Project Coordinator for the Child and Adolescent Trauma Treatment and Training Institute with the Center on Trauma and Children, and T.C. Johnson, who's the president of the Family Resource Youth Services Centers of Kentucky Coalition and the Youth Services Center coordinator at Winburn Middle. So I think their expertise in the school systems with mental health services and their ability to access resources across communities across Kentucky are going to be incredibly beneficial for our families. So we only have an hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And first and foremost, and whoever wants to start amongst the panelists can answer this question first. So, and you guys can just kind of bounce around to each other. So what are some questions that caregivers can or should ask their children as they are transitioning back to in-person schooling, or if they've just heard the news that they won't be transitioning back to in-person schooling? And when you're answering that question, if you can think about some really targeted questions that parents can ask other than just the general of, how was your day at school today?
Sure. I'd be happy to go first. So I think that it's really important, whether they're returning to school or they just found out the news that they're going to be staying at home, to ask some really pointed questions of things that you'd like to know what they're thinking about or what's going on for them. So with littler ones, we might target it as like, hey, we just found out we're not going back to school tomorrow. How are you feeling about that? What are you thinking about that? For our older children who like really might not be able to play sports right now or to connect with their friends when that's such a monumental milestone of that age group, it might be really important to ask questions about like, what are you most excited about? What are you feeling most stressed about? You know, when we're finished with dinner at night and you go up to your room, what are some things that you're thinking about? And what are some things that you're feeling?
I agree with all of that. And I think regardless of the age, there's things that they're missing, there's things that they're wishing for. And sometimes it's hard to articulate those. So one of my favorite questions with my own kids, but also when working with children and adolescents, is kind of this magic wand question, where it's, if you had a magic wand and can make one thing different about right now, what would that be? Because it could be really insightful into what is their biggest sense of loss right now, what their biggest emotional or physical need might be. So I think doing little questions like that to make it fun, but really allowing them to open up is important. I also think having these conversations when you're walking, when you're cooking together, when you're playing a game can be very helpful, because unlike adults who may be more comfortable having just a face-to-face conversation, our children and teens maybe like to have a side-by-side conversation. So finding ways to do that rather than just sitting them down and interviewing them can be super helpful as well.
And to piggyback off of what everyone else has said, definitely including them in games and fun activities. Cooking is always a good way of including your children in on finding out what's on their mind. And it comes to mind of some of my parents that I know that are working second shift or working the third shift. How do they make those connections? Well, sometimes you can have them journal what they feel, or artwork, or draw something. That way that you can give you a question, a starting point. You know, oh, well, okay, so I didn't know you felt that way. Or what does this picture mean? So just kind of thinking out of the box on how you can connect with your child about the things that they're feeling.
Perfect. I think those were all really great examples. I love the ideas too of kind of, distracting children while you're asking them questions so they don't really catch on that you're interviewing them. I think those of us who've worked with kids and adolescents use that trick a lot. So I'm curious to know, kind of within your own sectors, working in the school system, working, doing a lot of community outreach that you may be doing, and working as clinicians and therapists, kind of what are you seeing with children that are coming into you for services? Have there been a spike in ACEs? Have you noticed increased substance use, kind of violence or other risk factors that you're noticing in the home? And how can we address those? And how can we support parents and caregivers who may be experiencing that themselves so that they can support their children in that healing?
I think even pre-pandemic, the most pervasive emotional stressor that Americans experience is anxiety. And that has only been heightened tenfold or more for all of us. And so first recognizing where we are with that as the adults and finding ways to release that anxiety through self-care. And that's a big catchphrase right now, but what that really means is, how am I taking care of myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, creatively? What are ways in which I can gain energy to more effectively take care of myself, but also support my kids? And in turn, they too are experiencing significant anxiety. So by modeling those behaviors, we're helping them. And by helping them identify the ways in which they can release that anxiety. And I love TC pointed out some creative ways. Creativity is often an outlet that is left untapped. Writing can be very powerful, even for early writers, to have a journal that a parent or caregiver and a child share, that only the two of them write in and can write back and forth. That can be a really great way to communicate and offer suggestions for a child, and allow them a way to get their thoughts and feelings on paper. But I think the most important thing is just helping them learn simple coping skills by recognizing when they're feeling stressed. So things like deep breathing, focusing on 5 things they can see, 4 things they can hear, 3 things they can touch, ways to focus on the moment and be very mindful in that moment, rather than all of the chaos that they sense in their environment right now.
As for the Family Resource and Youth Services Centers, one of the things that we are experiencing with our families is uncertainty. They are very uncertain because of their income situation, their housing situation, food insecurities. So there are a lot of anxiety and frustrations behind that. But that's where our role comes in, and we invite our families to please reach out to us that way, that we may be able to provide services. And I have to say, we are the silent responders. We are there. I found myself last Friday at 7:30 in the evening trying to help a single dad with a daughter from another county wanting to sleep in his car because he had nowhere to go. And so just trying to provide and give that extra support. So within 24 hours, we had placement, we had a full-time job for them. So just reaching out and giving them that extra support and just letting them know that they're not alone, they're not in this alone. And then for our kids, including music and dance and just having some fun, just to distract, some of the things that are going on. Just give it for that moment, just giving let's just step outside the box and just kind of have a little fun.
So I think what we're seeing research-wise is that calls are actually going down. Reporting has actually gone down. And I think that is increasing everybody's anxiety in general, because we know everybody has a window of tolerance, right? Of how much stress that they can take and how many coping skills they have on hand until they feel like they've lost the ability to control that anxiety. And we know that that typically is when hyperarousal, which is overarousal, happens, or hypo, which is underarousal. And so we know that those are the times where maltreatment and neglect are the highest risk. And it's interesting, I was actually watching an interview with Dave Chappelle, which I will caution you, if language is an issue, you probably don't want to watch that, but otherwise he was phenomenal. And what I really loved that he pointed out was how in his worst moments in his life, he lives in this phenomenal community that has provided for him and protected him. And so I think one of the things that we can do to really help families right now, but also ourselves, right? Because we're all, you know, caregivers, parents, et cetera, is to reach out to our community and to know that that's okay. Now, we have some interesting times, right? Because we're in the midst of a pandemic. So reaching out to our community might be while we're outside on a walk, checking on one of our neighbors and waving from a safe distance, or just having those conversations. But then also as community members, noticing when a family that would typically walk together all of a sudden isn't coming out of their house anymore. Can you leave a little note for them like, hey, miss seeing you on your evening walks, hope everything's okay. Please know I'm here for you. So those are some of the ways I think that we can help as a community. I think what we're seeing as clinicians right now is this real sense of anxiety and ambiguity. And to be a caregiver or a parent who says, you know what, I don't know when the pandemic's going to end. We've never lived through one of these before, but you know what I do know? That I love you with all my heart and I'm going to be here for you no matter what. And I think sometimes I find myself too as an adult saying that to my friends, like, I don't know, buddy. I don't know when things are going to change, but what I know is I'm here for you. And if you need anything, you let me know. And so I think that there are unique ways that we can find that connection that we're all longing for right now. And I think that we also need to be cognizant, like Zoom is wonderful, but there's actually something called Zoom fatigue. And so for our children, yeah, everybody's shaking their head, I know. So for those of us who have a ton of meetings on Zoom, I feel exhausted at the end of the day. And it's not necessarily a negative thing, it's just different. And so how are you filling your own bucket so that you can fill your child's bucket? But then also thinking about if they're a child that's on Zoom literally all day from like 8:30 in the morning till 2:30 or 3:30 in the afternoon, what are some things that we're putting in place to help with that? And how are we helping them combat their Zoom fatigue? And how are we going out of our way to make sure that they're having connections?
Perfect. Yeah, I think those are all great. And it is funny that we all like nod our head about Zoom fatigue while we're on a Zoom meeting. So, but the panelists are lovely and it's the best Zoom meeting I've had in a long time. So it's no offense. So I do want, I think one of the things that I've noticed and I think can really negatively impact kiddos is when they hear parents kind of talking about their own stress, when they overhear them, right, saying, oh my gosh, I can't stand this virtual school. This is driving me crazy. Why can't, well, you know, going on and on and on. And so how do we as parents kind of balance our, and speaking that as a parent myself, so how do we balance our need to express our own frustrations, but how do we do that in a way that doesn't overwhelm our kiddos? I think is important. And the other thing that I've noticed a lot, and this may also be, so from my background in substance misuse as well, is there's a lot of kind of Facebook memes and Instagram memes about, you know, oh, we're going to drink our way through this pandemic. And, you know, and it's actually quite terrifying, right? Because we know that there are a lot of families who are really struggling with that and who are trying not to engage in those behaviors, but it's seemingly just kind of like the coping skill du jour to get through the pandemic. And so how can we kind of support those parents, I'm wondering, who are struggling with that and their families as well?
So I think there are a couple things. One, I think for the families that have substance use history or are concerned that they're drinking too much, making sure that we're giving other coping skills that are healthy and helpful that don't involve alcohol. So like coffee hour. I've even had like some communities where everybody will sit at the end of their driveway and have coffee at a certain time. So they're right near their children who may be inside, but also just getting some time away from parents. So that's one way to be helpful. And then I just think we need to keep promoting other skills and recognize that it's not one fits all. So for some people, they can't go out for a walk for various reasons, and it's starting to get colder. So can they do yoga together? Can they get up and dance? While they're sitting on Zoom meetings, can you do dance feet? Have you guys heard about that? Where you're like, you got a little song in your head and you're moving your feet, but you can't tell right now that I'm moving all that much, but my feet are moving. So just a way to kind of break up that monotony. But I also think that's really important to point out that a lot of parents right now and a lot of families and a lot of children will view COVID as a traumatic experience. And that the isolation will be extraordinarily difficult for them. So for parents, it's just like 9/11 or any other natural disaster. You want to limit their screen time in terms of media and news reports, because especially if children are still very much egocentric, they have a really hard time understanding the difference between reality and fantasy. And so that can really heighten their anxiety, but also we want to make sure that we're being careful not to give them secondary traumatic stress, where they're hearing about these traumatic events and then they're experiencing the symptoms of post-traumatic stress themselves. So just, helping parents and reminding them like, hey, I know you put your kids down at this time at night. Do you want to jump on the phone, or do you want to meet outside and do a socially distanced walk so that we can talk about what's been going on in your day for you? And just coming up with creative ways like that. And then also reminding people that Al-Anon and AA and NA are having Zoom meetings now. Sometimes churches are doing like tent covers outside where people can socially distance and have those meetings. So again, going back to the community and reminding us that we're not alone.
I think reaching out to neighbors, other parents, I think that's the most important thing we can do right now. So a good friend of mine recently was like, I've never done something like this before, but I hosted a fourth grade mom's lunch in my backyard, and they just brought a chair and their own lunch. But it was just an opportunity to connect with the other people who are going through the exact same thing, with kids at the exact same developmental level. So knowing that you are not alone, what you're experiencing right now, the parents that you may have not connected with prior are experiencing something quite similar. So reaching out, making those connections through your students' classrooms can work. Also, telehealth is available, and there are plenty of providers who are eager to support individuals to develop their own coping skills, to allow them a safe place to vent and process and emote confidentially, so that if you're a single parent, who in your home can you process this with? So reaching out to others is going to be super important, because we have our own adult burdens and our kids have their own kid-sized burdens, and we can't blur the two things. We have to find adult outlets for that, healthy adult outlets. I think if you find a certain time of day is when you tend to look toward negative coping skills, like excessive drinking, overeating, whatever that might be. Intentionally planning a replacement activity, whether that is a soothing cup of tea, a walk, a mindless show on television, whatever that is, something that works for you as a replacement activity. So I feel like connection and planning are key components of really getting through this without falling into really negative patterns of
And so I will add, again, our family resource and youth service centers are very connected to our families. So that's also an outlet for parents to reach out for resources. They can help with referrals to agencies that can provide that extra support, as well as provide activities that they can do with their kids and with the neighborhood, and even with the friskies that will distract their minds, kind of give them another outlet and let them know that one is they're not alone. There are all kinds of activities going across this Commonwealth with our frisky departments, and I've had them send me information, and I'm like, wow, you all are really doing some really neat stuff. One frisky had their whole neighborhood do a scavenger hunt. And so, you know, it really got them involved. It got the apartment complexes involved, and the neighbors involved, and the parents involved. So it was a distraction as well as an opportunity for other families to communicate with other families.
Good. And I think that's a good idea. We had a good question about reaching families that are in more kind of rural communities. And so using some of those, using those friskies, I think is an important idea, and getting families connected safely. That could be a great resource for those rural communities. And just one follow-up question. There's a great book called The Happiness Trap, if anybody has read that. And I think as adults, we're definitely susceptible to that kind of idea that we have to be happy. But I think kids also have that belief too. And so I'm wondering, how do we let kids know that it's okay to not be happy all the time, and that it's okay to have different emotions, and that we don't just have to be kind of springing up rainbows continuously, but that it's okay to feel the full continuum. How could we encourage parents to kind of let our kids know that?
I think modeling that for them is really important. And while I don't think a kid needs to hear all of our adult burdens and worries and concerns, I think it's important to have conversations. For example, in my district, they decided last night that we're not returning to school until at least January. So whatever feelings parents may be having about that are understandable, but it's okay to talk to your child about, I'm really disappointed. This has been really hard, and I was hoping that there was an end in sight. I wonder how you're feeling about it, because it's a really good way to normalize those feelings, but also to open it up to those opportunities to be reassuring. We don't know what's going to happen in January with regards to school, but between now and then, even though we may be disappointed or frustrated or stressed, this is what we're going to do to get through that. But I think even things unrelated to the pandemic, just acknowledging the way we're feeling with our kids is important. So if we're feeling really frustrated, it doesn't mean we have to raise our voice or slam down something on the kitchen counter, but we can say, I'm really frustrated right now. I'm going to need to take a break. I'm feeling really stressed right now. Why don't we go take a walk? So acknowledging negative feelings and then finding a way to model for them a healthy coping skill can be really powerful for the long term.
And recognizing, because that is the piggyback off of you, Rainey, that is, our kids actually, they pay really close attention to our emotions and our feelings. So just making sure that we are aware of that, they're focused in on us. And so, it is so important that we express how we feel, communicate that to our kids on how we're feeling right now. Yes, let's take a break. Our mom just needs to get a timeout, but let's talk about it in a minute. But they feel it. They know what they can connect with you through how they feel.
I think two ways that might be helpful too is just to play like the face game, which is show me all the different emotions you had today on your face. And then for all kids, but older kids as well, what may be helpful, like actually during the day while they're on Zoom at school or whatever Google platform or whatever they're using, is you guys remember the different faces, and it's magnetic, and you can move the magnet to what you're feeling at that moment. So if they've got that near them and they're having a moment, they can kind of move it so that when you pass by them just to check on them, you may be able to pull them aside and ask them in that moment, or ask them later when there's a break. But I did want to come back to the rural families, because I think it just happens sometimes when those of us who like work in Lexington or Louisville or live in Frankfurt or wherever the case may be, that we have all of these resources. We might not always point out everything that we could for the rural families. So there are a couple things. One is I'm going to plug the Connect one pager that's coming out in a couple weeks, but there's a national parent hotline. So I'm just going to give that number really quick for everybody. And that's 855-427-2736. Again, that's 855-427-2736. So that's something that parents can use, especially if they don't have internet connection or the broadband with, to be able to get on telemental health. I would think that they would be able to give lots of resources to assist you with that. The other thing is, I know this may be a hardship for some of our families to be able to get there, but if you could get to your local health department, or even potentially if your local library is open, and ask to use a room that has internet connection, if you can bring your own tablet or a laptop. And even sometimes communities will provide those. So that it can be utilized. So that's really helpful too. And then also you may be able to, if you need to attend meetings like AA or Al-Anon or anything, you may be able to attend those meetings in that way as well.
Great. Thank you, guys. So I'm curious, kind of talking about the Friskies a little bit. I'm wondering, TC, if you can kind of walk us through. I don't think people fully understand that resource always, and just the amazing ability you all have to maybe create everything out of nothing at all, sometimes for families and communities. So I think it's really important, especially because we talk about more rural communities, so many schools, no matter what county they're in, have access to that service.
Well, we have actually been doing this now for 30 years. We're actually celebrating our 30th year of services as part of the CARA. We have this motto, whatever it takes. So whether you're in the rural counties or urban cities, we do whatever it takes. So there's a lot of activities going across the state of Kentucky. And I'm actually amazed at what our coordinators are doing in the rural counties with providing services and activities like food assistance. They're actually out there doing wellness checks from farm to farm if they have to. And connecting with those community partners to provide any type of services or help or aid that families need. One particular county was talking about there is a truck towing company that has provided over 1,000 toys for that community for several years now. And so they're not missing a beat. And our coordinators are working endlessly to help during this time. Many of them are helping with families with jobs, seeking jobs. We have so many families that were not eligible for their stimulus or even for food stamps or SNAP. And so churches, community partners have come together to help with food insecurities. Coordinators are doing all kinds of activities. Some of the things that they sent me was they're doing scavenger hunts. They're doing online story times with families, helping them with parent engagement by having parent cafes where they connect with the families, whether it's through a church or a library, or making those connections with them and letting them know, whether it's phone calls or a home visit, making sure that they connect and that they provide the services that they need. Giving them those social media connections, communications, making sure that they're staying connected with all the kids. With their Amazon wish list, food boxes, blessing boxes that have hygiene products and household products in them, and even postcards. They're mailing postcards, or they're sending a package of postcards and stamps to their students to be able to connect with other families. So they are out there beating the bushes really hard.
That's awesome. I'm always amazed at humans' abilities to be so creative in times of stress and struggles to be able to support one another. So, I mean, it sounds like, you know, I think one of the questions that came up was, how can providers, kind of what are some strategies that providers can use to help ease the anxiety of parents and caregivers and their children when kind of dealing with this public health crisis. And I think one of the ways is to talk about the supportive services that Friskies and schools absolutely can provide, I think, to really make those connections. But I'm curious if you guys have other specific examples of kind of good strategies that providers can use, because I know we have some on today and who are probably going to listen later.
I think that one of the things that I have found the most amazing is that different providers, different organizations have found their ways to partner together to meet various needs. So providing a church, providing a place for kids to come and do schoolwork for a couple hours a week. A library providing tutoring services and web connection for kids. Just different organizations finding ways to support, to help kids and their families still be connected to each other. Those have all been extremely helpful. I think too, just having at the ready a list of resources for the community, but also hotlines, because I think sometimes my anxiety is at its peak at 3 a.m. And who can I reach out to when I am so overwhelmed? So giving those 24/7 options for adults and our youth as well, that they have someone they can connect with regardless when, how, where they might be. So I think those are two things to think. How can my agency provide, maybe change the way we're providing services to meet the current needs of families? And second, do we have an adequate and expansive resource list and really coach our families through what they are and how to use them?
You would be really surprised too how out of the box that our community partners get. I actually had a community partner contact me, and the question for her was, what was one of our out of the box needs that I needed? And so I thought about, I have several students that have pets, and so there's nothing no worse than a kid grieving on how their pet is going to eat or how to take care of their pet. So that community partner chose, that was their mission. They were going to donate funds for pet food. So over the summer, we sent out over 200 cat and dog food bags for families. So as we were doing our wellness check with them, we would ask, do you have a pet? You know, cat or dog or other. And so they would tell us. And so when they would come to pick up their food boxes, they also picked up their food for their pets. So that particular community partner was awesome. In fact, we talked this week because we're planning a pet show next month. So the kids will be able to send in a picture of their pets. We have several different categories that we're gonna do. We're gonna have them dress them up and do tricks. And so we're gonna do pet shops. And so we actually have some of our pet shops are even going to donate gift cards for our winners. And then we even actually have one of our former students that actually owns Most Valuable Pets. And so they are so excited to participate and be able to reach out to our kids. So our community partners are actually thinking outside the box on how they can help families.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So I think one of the things we can do as providers is also just normalizing this, that we're all feeling this way, that we're all in this together. And though we may be providers and do a lot of things for the community, we are feeling a lot of the same things that everyone else is feeling. We're all human. I think another thing that we can do too as providers is to be there and support each other. So maybe that's a weekly Zoom meeting, or maybe it's even phone calls. But I think, yeah, I saw it. TC was like, that's true. But provide, just provide that support to each other, but then also touch base on the new things that we're doing. I think within the past 7 months, I have seen such creativity and so many things change, even where I work, so that we could meet the needs of our community. So just keeping up to date with those. And for rural communities, that may mean that you have to make several phone calls to your community partners to just say, hey, wanted to let you know, we've moved to telehealth. Here's how we can do things now. Here's what we're able to provide. I've got some families, though, that are really concerned about food security right now. I was wondering if you could help me with that, or you could lead me in a direction to link me with somebody. And so really, I think we're called upon now to be true systems of care for each family and to really look around and see what's available in our communities to meet the needs.
Great. I'm curious if you guys can kind of list maybe some very specific resources, specific agencies that you're familiar with, maybe that are across the state or kind of have a sister partner across the state that might be able to kind of prevent and mitigate experiences or impact of ACEs that families are experiencing right now.
Of course, one of the places that they can go is to the teamkentucky.com. Has all types of resources across the entire state. And they even target Pacific areas. So in your county, they can actually tell you exactly what's in your county that can help. Like right now, the information that's coming out to help families with paying their rent or paying their utilities. It's connected through that. In Fayette County, it may be through the Community Action Center. In Franklin County, it may be through another agency, but being able to connect those dots through that. Trust me, your Family Resource and Youth Service Center, they will know where to go.
I think the local health departments, even if you can't physically get there, giving them a call, that can be a really great resource. The Cabinet for Health and Family Services can be a super resource, and all of our counties have a local office that can connect you to perhaps public assistance if that's needed now, or other agencies and resources that could help meet needs. Our schools are still operating even if our kids aren't in the building. So thinking about resources that exist within those, our Family Resource and Youth Service Centers are among those, but school counselors, school social workers, and school psychologists are still available to work with students as they were before. However, it may not be in person, but they can find creative ways to support your child and provide support for you as a parent as well. I think public libraries are a great resource for bringing community together in a way that may look different right now, but they kind of serve as a hub in some of our communities. And though there aren't YMCAs in every community, there are quite a few across the state, and they provide great resources for wellness, perhaps childcare, and they too can connect families with resources that are available.
Yeah, so I think Team Kentucky is a wonderful resource. I also think the Department of Behavioral Health is a great resource. Then you've got your local community mental health centers that you could call. And then in addition, I just want to remind everybody about the National Suicide Hotline and to let you know that you can text them now. You don't just necessarily have to call. So especially if you're having a teenager that's struggling that may not want to get on the phone and talk, there's the ability to text. And then there's also the National Domestic Violence and Abuse Hotline, the RAIN hotline. So those are some places too that you can turn to if you feel like you have mental health needs. And then you'd be surprised, like our local community mental or our local public health centers, and then also hospitals often have places or resources if there's mental health needs that need to be met, that you could also contact them.
Great. I think one of the things that we've seen in the news lately is the amount of moms who've left the workforce just recently to kind of navigate this pandemic. And I recognize that we are a group full of women on this Zoom meeting right now, but there are also a lot of dads who are incredibly stressed out by this as well, and who are now unemployed because of the pandemic, or are single dads and trying to navigate how to work and parent as well. So I'm wondering if you guys can maybe just in our last few minutes kind of talk about some unique ways that we might be able to include fathers into services to support, and maybe also how to reduce some barriers, especially as providers, how to reach out specifically to dads to get them involved in services.
Sometimes the words we use can make all the difference. I've noticed since becoming a parent, and my husband has noticed this as well, that all the phone calls come to me. That if he shows up at the doctor or the dentist with my children, that they make a comment about, "Oh, Dad's here today." No, and they don't say that to me. So I think that's step one, is don't be surprised when a dad is involved. It's not a cause. Don't celebrate it. Just appreciate it, that they are there and they're a partner. You don't have to always call mom. Dad is involved. Don't make an assumption that there is a mom involved, or an assumption that dad isn't involved. So I think we can communicate biases without actually articulating those, and that happens quite a bit when it comes to child rearing, that we fall back to generational patterns of parenting and making assumptions based on that. I think too, helping connect dads to other dads, or just dads to parents. Again, it doesn't have to be, the fourth grade mom's picnic. It could be the fourth grade parent picnic. So being inclusive, so that those fathers that are home right now with the kids and are doing the day-to-day, that they too have support. And finally, thinking about, yes, women have been forced to choose to leave the workforce, but some dads have too. And so I think just focusing on the fact that parents have been forced to make that choice, or some have not had the choice and had to leave it, and what that does to one's psyche as well as their financial stability, needs to be kept in mind when we're serving them. So it's not just, I'm going to give you food and rent assistance, but how can we help you cope with this loss? How can we help you connect with job seeking services, etc.? So what are some unique ways that the adults can maintain their identity beyond just being a parent at home as well?
So I'm going to point out, Jana just put in the chat box actually that there's a fatherhood summit that's coming up next week that's free. So that's wonderful. So, and it's on their website. So you could certainly invite dads that you knew. But I think, you know, going to what Rainey said about implicit biases and thinking about, you know, our single parents, whoever they may be, or our same sex couple parents. And reaching out to them as well. It could be that both of those parents have lost their job. And so maybe just reaching out and saying, hey, I'm doing a check-in with all the families that I work with. And I'm wondering, like, what are the coping skills that you're using right now? Is there anything that I can help with? And then, you know, making sure you've got your list of resources to give them. I think for dads too, you know, let's face it, there's stereotypes out there for everyone, right? And that includes fathers. And so this whole, men are supposed to kind of just suck it up and go along with things and blah, 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 that whole perception. On top of that, then losing their job. So you might see more anger in them as opposed to sadness or anxiety, because that's what society has taught them, that it's okay for them to emote that. And so kind of just reaching out and having those difficult conversations and just saying, you know, I wonder if you're feeling angry, or I wonder if really you're feeling stressed and it's coming out as anger. And I want to let you know that's totally normal. And we can talk about it, or if you don't feel comfortable talking with me, I've got some other places that I think you might enjoy. But again, I think it really falls back to connection and kindness. And so where is it that they can find their village, and where do they feel most comfortable, and how can we link them with that resource?
Also, recognizing that we have more single fathers that are raising their kids. And so just, you know, making that connection. In talking to one of our coordinators in another county, what they had was it pizza with dads and pizzas. And so what they offered was they offered a ready-made pizza, or they offered a pizza kit, which they had to actually, dads came in, picked up their pizza kits, went home, and they had to send in a picture of them actually preparing the pizza with their kids. And so when they sent that in, there was another incentive for them to participate. And so she said it went over well. In fact, she had 100. And this was in one of our rural counties, that she actually had 100 dads actually participate in that activity. So pulling out different, I know we always have muffins for moms. One of my goals is to have dinner for dads, you know, the man in your life, you know, the best man activity. And so just getting those informations out to those dads that there's a conference just for you. There's an activity just for you to have, to tell you about a summer camp I did one year, and we actually had an activity for our dads. Well, I provided a meal for them, and so we actually had David Kozart come out, and so it was really funny because they looked at me and said, "It's the man cave now." And so that was my cue that I needed to leave the room. So it was awesome. And they just enjoyed just having that conversation. So again, maybe it's not in person, but maybe it's a online, a Zoom thing for the fellows to get together and share about their kids and about being a single dad.
Well, I can't thank you all enough for sharing just this wealth of information today, as we support parents and we support children, and really try to build that resiliency in all of our families across the state. I'm going to turn it over to Carly for some wrap up, but I also want to remind you guys to look out for that Connect one pager that's going to come out. I think it's going to be super helpful as we support families and children across the Commonwealth and really try to build that family resilience because we're going to get through this. And it's going to look really differently. A new normal is probably coming, but we are going to get through this. And the only way we're going to do that is to do it together.
Thanks, Tanya. So I just want to echo Tanya's thoughts there. Thank you so much to our panelists again. I know I really personally appreciate it. I'm sure others really appreciated the concrete strategies and skills and resources that you all shared with this group today to help, you know, the kiddos and the families in our lives during these very strange times. So some key takeaways from our panelists today just kind of include, you know, of course, this is a time of increased stress and anxiety due to the pandemic and just other events of this year. And that is especially the case for kids. And so just kind of reiterating the importance of taking care of ourselves as adults and modeling those self-care behaviors for the kids in our lives so that they can see that and see how that's done. Making sure that we're emotionally available for them and helping them kind of develop some of those coping skills that can help them not just through this time, but also as they move forward in life. And then also making sure that the kids and the families that we come into contact with know about the community resources that are out there, and there are a lot, such as the Friskies and what all they do throughout their communities, and just encouraging them to utilize those resources as well. And it all boils down to, like the panelists mentioned, you know, connection to others, connection to community. Those are really the keys that are going to get everyone through this pandemic and through this year. So just kind of really wanted to thank the panelists again for hitting home on those strategies and those points. So as Tanya mentioned, again, that Connect one pager will be coming out in the next several weeks. So please be on the lookout for that. We'll make sure to include you all when we release that. And I will also be sending out a follow-up email in the next few days with the recording of this event. So please feel free to share the recording with your networks, anybody that you think might find this information useful. So that's all I have today. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate you all taking the time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for having us. And everybody be encouraged and just be grateful for just today.
Great words to end on. Thanks, TC.